For 3 years, I'd been killing myself at that bank. Double shifts that stretched past midnight, impossible deadlines that seemed designed to break me, covering for everyone else's incompetence while they took credit for my work. And Clark, my district manager, had actually promised, that this meeting was about advancing my leadership path. I sat in the district conference room, hands folded professionally on the polished table. Clark cleared his throat with dramatic importance and said, "Maya, congratulations. You're being reassigned to Branch 14. A pause. Then I heard faint snickers from other managers around the table. My stomach dropped. Temporarily, of course, Clark added quickly, though his smirk told a completely different story. It told me this was permanent. This was punishment disguised as opportunity. One supervisor whispered, not nearly quietly enough, "Branch 14? Jesus Christ." Another murmured with barely concealed pity, "Poor girl." Clark clicked to a PowerPoint slide titled Restructuring Initiative, and I kept talking like I wasn't even sitting there. Like I was furniture. "Maya will be right at home there. Branch 14 needs someone who isn't quite leadership material yet." The words hit me like a physical slap across the face. I felt my cheeks burn hot with humiliation, but my voice stayed small, polite, trained. I wasn't informed of any. Clark cut me off mid-sentence with a dismissive wave. "Well, now you are. Report there tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock sharp." He didn't even look at me when he said it. I gathered my things mechanically, hands shaking slightly. As I walked toward the door, trying to maintain some dignity, I heard him mutter to the supervisor next to him, "She'll quit within 3 weeks. Nobody lasts longer at that place." And in that terrible moment, with anger, shame, and humiliation mixing together in my chest like poison, I made a decision. I decided I wouldn't quit. Not this time. Not for him. Not for anyone. Branch 14 looked exactly like a bank that had already accepted death. Half the fluorescent lights flickered like dying heartbeats. 2 of the 4 teller windows were permanently closed with handwritten "Be back soon" signs that looked months old. A dusty plant lay wilted on the floor near the entrance, like even it had given up trying to survive here. "New manager?" asked a tired voice behind me. I turned to see a middle-aged woman with gray circles under her eyes and posture, like she carried invisible weights on her shoulders every single day. "I'm Tessa," she said, walking toward me slowly. "They send you here to fix us or finish us off." I blinked, confused by the question. "What do you mean?" Tessa pointed to a printed memo tacked to the community bulletin board as casually as someone pointing out the weather forecast or lunch menu. It was a closure plan, official letterhead, dated 3 weeks from now, and my name was listed clearly under non-essential staff to be terminated. I felt a jolt of panic shoot through my body. Not only was this place already scheduled to be shut down, I was supposed to go down with it. I was expendable, disposable. Tessa shrugged with practiced resignation. "They do this every year or so. Clark sabotages a branch, calls it underperforming, corporate shuts it down, and someone convenient gets fired. Easy way to cut costs and eliminate people they don't like." She looked at me with something almost like sympathy. "This year," she added quietly, "it looks like that someone is you." That night, I sat alone in the cramped back office of Branch 14, scrolling through old performance reports on the ancient computer. The numbers didn't match real account activity I could verify. Customer service metrics were wildly inconsistent month to month. Loan files were missing critical signatures and documentation. Either the entire branch was possessed by chaos and incompetence, or someone had deliberately tampered with the data. I checked the metadata timestamps on the altered files. My heartbeat kicked up hard. The alteration logs were all tied to Clark's administrative login. He'd been systematically doctoring our numbers for months, making us look worse than we actually were, setting us up to fail so the failure would look justified on paper. I leaned back in the creaking office chair, trying to breathe normally. He wasn't just setting up the branch to fail, he was setting me up personally, making sure I'd be the one blamed when everything collapsed.
My phone buzzed on the desk.
A text message from Clark himself. Don't make this harder on yourself, Maya. Just do your 6 weeks and move on quietly. It's better for everyone. But something deep inside me hardened like cooling steel.
No.
I wasn't going to move on quietly. I wasn't going to be his convenient scapegoat. I was going to move up instead. And he wasn't going to see it coming until it was far too late. The next morning, a furious man burst through the branch doors, waving crumpled paperwork like a weapon. You people completely ruined my loan application, he shouted, face red with rage. I'm reporting this entire branch to the State Banking Commission. Tessa whispered to me nervously, that's one of the accounts Clark personally messed with. We were told not to fix it.
Great. Perfect.
Just what I needed on day 2. I approached the angry customer calmly, introduced myself as the new manager, and asked if he could give me just 10 minutes in my private office to review his situation. He looked skeptical but agreed, probably just wanting someone to actually listen. 45 minutes later, I had corrected his loan application completely, explained what had really gone wrong and why, waived several unfair fees, and secured him as one of our most grateful clients. The man actually shook my hand and thanked me warmly on his way out. The staff stood there staring at me like I'd just performed actual sorcery. Tessa pulled me aside later. You know Clark specifically told us not to fix these customer errors, right? He said it would make corporate act faster on the closure. And you listened to him? I asked. She looked down. We wanted to keep our jobs as long as possible. Fighting seemed pointless. She paused, studying my face carefully. Then she said quietly, but I'm willing to help you if you're actually planning to fight this. Her voice dropped even lower. Just don't expect Clark to go down without starting a war. I needed evidence, and I needed results fast, both at the same time. So I created a detailed plan, a spreadsheet I privately called Operation Resurrection. It listed everything systematically. Every broken customer account, every angry client, every missing signature, every single discrepancy tied to Clark's login, every potential turnaround opportunity. Then I called a staff meeting. Just the 4 of us, me, Tessa, and the 2 tellers, Luis and Bailey. I know you've been abandoned, I said quietly, honestly. But if we work together, we can save this place. And ourselves. Tessa nodded slowly. Luis and Bailey exchanged cautiously hopeful looks. We spent the entire day reorganizing workflows, calling customers with apologies and solutions, cleaning up corrupted data. It felt like breathing life into a corpse that everyone had already given up on. By closing time, for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw the faintest spark of hope in everyone's eyes. When I returned to my desk that evening, an encrypted folder had appeared on my desktop. One I definitely hadn't created myself. I tried 3 different passwords I thought might work. Nothing. On the 4th attempt, using Clark's initials backwards, the folder opened. Inside were dozens of forwarded emails between Clark and the regional vice president. Subject lines that made my blood run cold. Branch shutdown timeline, reassignment scapegoat, performance manipulation strategies. And then the worst one. The one that made me physically sick. Maya is perfect. Ambitious, naive, and easy to blame when this all goes down. I immediately copied every single file to a hidden flash drive I kept in my purse. Someone had sent these to me intentionally, risking their own job. But who? Who had access to these emails, and why were they helping me? One email ended with a line that felt like a threat. If she pushes back at all, we'll bury her completely. The next morning, a bank auditor arrived unannounced. A sharp-eyed man in his 50s named Colin who asked to speak with me privately in the back office. Corporate received several anonymous reports, he said carefully, all tied to errors and irregularities traced back to your login credentials. My breath caught in my throat. My login? That's impossible. Colin shook his head slowly, watching my reaction. You seem genuinely surprised by this information. I am. Completely surprised. Those weren't me. He studied me for a long moment, clearly assessing whether I was lying. Finally, he said very quietly, Look. I can't say too much officially, but be extremely careful. Someone is building a very specific narrative about you, documenting a case. I didn't blink or look away. Then they're going to be very disappointed with how this ends. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. Before leaving, Colin said, "If you have anything to share with me, now would be the time." While I'm still here conducting the audit, I couldn't trust him.
Not yet.
Not completely. But I could trust numbers and results. I leaned into the rebuilding work even harder. Every morning, customers lined up with problems from months of deliberate neglect. And every single day, we fixed them all. Slowly but steadily, accounts stabilized. Customer satisfaction scores started climbing. Word began spreading that Branch 14 was actually helping people again. Luis told me, "I've worked here 3 years and never seen customers actually happy before." Bailey added, "You're doing more in 1 week than Clark did in 3 years of managing this district." I smiled, but inside, tension coiled tighter and tighter. Because I knew Clark was watching, knew he was getting reports, knew this wasn't over. At 8 o'clock that evening, I opened my email and froze. Clark had scheduled a surprise inspection for Thursday morning, 2 days away. For 2 straight days, we cleaned, organized, documented, repaired, and rebuilt like our lives depended on it. The branch transformed into something almost respectable, professional, functional. But I also prepared for something else entirely. I gathered every report Clark had falsified, every time-stamped discrepancy, every login trail showing his access, every customer complaint he'd deliberately buried. My flash drive was a loaded weapon now. Tessa leaned over my desk late Wednesday night. "Are you sure you want to do this? Clark destroys people who cross him. I've seen it happen." "I'm not crossing him," I said calmly. "I'm just exposing him." The morning of the inspection, Clark arrived 45 minutes early, clearly hoping to catch us unprepared. Clark strutted into Branch 14 like he was walking onto a stage he owned. Designer suit, expensive shoes polished to a mirror shine, ego filling every corner of the room like toxic gas. "Maya," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I see you've tried your best to make this place presentable. How cute." He interrogated Luis aggressively about procedure details. He nitpicked the customer service posters Bailey had carefully organized. He made cruel comments about Tessa's age and energy level. And then he turned to me with a sharp smile. "Let's see your actual performance numbers." I pulled up the dashboard on the main computer. The branch had improved by 22% in just 2 weeks. Customer complaints were down. New accounts were up. Loan processing was faster. His smile faltered. Just for a blink. But I caught it. "That's unexpected," he said tightly. He stepped very close to me and hissed so only I could hear, "I don't care what you fix. This branch is closing on schedule and so are you." The very next day, someone uploaded a video to the district's internal portal. Clark's voice. Clark's face. Clark's actual words recorded at some previous meeting. In the recording, he called Branch 14 staff dead weight, charity cases, and called me specifically a pathetic wannabe leader who doesn't know her place. The video went viral overnight. Not national news, but enough to spread through our entire company and hit the local community like a bomb. Customers came into the branch furious, at Clark, not at us. Staff from other branches sent me messages. "Is this recording real? Did he seriously say that about you?" Finally, someone caught him. The regional vice president emailed me directly with an urgent meeting request. In the VP's office, I sat across from him as he closed the blinds for privacy. "Is there something I need to know about Clark's management practices?" he asked carefully. I took a deep breath and placed a folder on his desk. Inside were 6 pages of documented discrepancies, just the tip of the iceberg I'd compiled. The VP looked genuinely stunned. "This is extremely serious." "There's more," I said quietly. "Much more if you want to see it." He stared at me for a long, hard moment. "Then you better bring absolutely everything you have, because we're going to deal with this properly." At the door, he added seriously, Maya, prepare yourself. Things may get very ugly very quickly. Rumors spread like wildfire through the district. Other branch managers started approaching me privately, finally admitting that Clark had sabotaged their numbers too over the years. One confessed he'd manipulated loan approvals to make his favorite branches look better. Another admitted he'd threatened anyone who questioned his methods. This wasn't just one corrupt manager. It was an entire rotten ecosystem built around protecting Clark. I returned to Branch 14 that evening and found a voicemail from Clark waiting for me. A threatening one. His voice came through the speaker, tightly controlled but absolutely furious underneath. You don't know who you're playing with, Maya.
Stop digging.
Stop talking to people. Or I will personally make sure you never work in banking again. That's a promise. Tessa entered my office just as the message ended. Her eyes widened with fear. You have to give everything to corporate immediately, she whispered urgently. I will. I promised. But not yet. Timing is everything. Because I needed to wait for exactly the right moment. When I had everything documented. When corporate was actually ready to act. When Clark couldn't escape or cover his tracks. Colin, the auditor, returned 3 days later specifically asking to review my data personally. He pulled me aside in private. I need to show you something confidential. He revealed a list, other branches across the entire district with identical discrepancies and patterns. All tied to Clark's access. All showing the same manipulation techniques. Then he leaned closer. Your files sealed the case completely. We're almost ready to act. But I haven't officially submitted anything yet, I said, confused. He looked at me meaningfully. Someone already has. On your behalf. The encrypted folder. The anonymous sender. Someone inside corporate was feeding me ammunition and simultaneously building a case. Be at your branch at exactly 9 a.m. tomorrow, Colin said seriously. Don't leave early. Don't be late. The next morning felt electric with tension. Customers lined up before we even opened. Staff moved with focused purpose. The branch buzzed with energy I'd never felt before. I was reviewing corrected loan documents when the door swung open hard.
Clark.
His face was red and blotchy, sweating despite the cool morning. Eyes wild with barely contained rage. "May," he barked loud enough that customers turned to stare. My office. Right now. Customers watched nervously as I walked calmly to the small conference room. Clark slammed the door behind us hard enough to rattle the frame. You're done, he hissed.
Finished.
I'm putting you on immediate performance review. I didn't flinch. For what specific violations? For undermining me. For insubordination. For voices outside. Multiple footsteps in the lobby. Clark froze mid-sentence. The conference room door opened without anyone knocking. Corporate security stood there. The regional vice president. And Colin the auditor. Clark's face went from red to white. The VP read from an official folder. Clark Reynolds, you are being terminated effective immediately for misconduct, falsifying financial reports, harassment, and retaliatory behavior against staff. Clark stuttered, "Wait, this is a mistake. You can't." Security officers stepped forward professionally. "Sir, you need to come with us now." As they escorted him toward the exit, he twisted around, eyes locking on me with pure hatred. "This is your fault, Maya. You did this to me." I didn't reply, didn't gloat, just watched silently. Colin approached me after Clark was removed. He handed me a sealed envelope. "This is for you. From corporate." Inside was a formal acknowledgement on company letterhead. Branch 14 has demonstrated the highest growth improvement rate in the district under your leadership. We are halting all closure plans effective immediately. Further, we request your presence for district restructuring discussions next week. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining the words. A branch that was literally months from death saved. And me, the woman Clark tried to destroy, was the reason why. Tessa approached carefully with another envelope. Clark left this behind in his old desk before security cleared it. It's labeled confidential. Inside wasn't a letter. It was a leather-bound notebook. Clark's personal planning journal. I read with growing disbelief. Staff weak and easily manipulated. Replace later. Maya, ambitious but gullible. Perfect scapegoat for branch failure. Continue ghost accounts to disguise financial losses. Destroy branch completely in Q3. He documented everything. Every manipulation. Every sabotage plan. Every cruel calculation. It was the final nail in his professional coffin. My email pinged with a new message. Subject line: promotion discussion. Corporate executives sat around a long glass conference table, watching me carefully, like I was simultaneously a threat and a miracle they didn't quite understand. I presented everything systematically, calmly, professionally. The doctored data, the email trails, the audit discrepancies, Clark's personal notebook documenting his sabotage. By the end, the room was completely silent. Then the vice president said, "Maya, you didn't just save a failing branch. You exposed an entire pattern of corruption that's been happening for years." Another executive added, clearly impressed, "You realize you've changed this district permanently? Forced us to examine everything." They asked me to step outside while they discussed next steps in private. After 10 agonizing minutes that felt like hours, they called me back in. "We'd like to offer you the role of Regional Operations Manager," the VP said with a genuine smile. Effective immediately. Clark's old position. The exact job he'd said I'd never be good enough for. The job he'd used as a weapon against me for years. I accepted without letting my voice tremble. "Thank you. I won't let you down." My first official assignment in the new role: visit Branch 14 personally as their new district supervisor. Walking back into Branch 14 as the district's highest-ranking operations manager felt surreal, like stepping into a dream. Employees actually clapped when I entered. Customers congratulated me. Tessa hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. "You did it," she whispered, voice breaking. "You actually did it." I smiled through tears.
No.
We did it. All of us together. As I left the branch that evening, feeling lighter than I had in years, someone was waiting outside in the parking lot.
Clark.
He looked nothing like the powerful, intimidating man who'd once publicly humiliated me. His suit was wrinkled, hair uncombed, face drawn with stress and sleeplessness.
Defeated.
"Maya, please," he said, approaching carefully. "I need your help. I can't find another position at this level anywhere. Everyone knows what happened." They said a reference from you might help. I stared at him, remembering every insult, every manipulation, every deliberate attempt to break me and end my career. He'd tried to bury me alive professionally. Instead, I'd buried him. He reached out with a shaking hand. "Please," he whispered. "I'm begging you here." I stepped slightly closer, so he could hear me clearly. "You once told me I wasn't leadership material," I said softly but firmly. "That I'd never be anything more than background noise. Remember saying that?" His face crumpled with shame and recognition. "Maya, I didn't mean..." I cut him off gently, but decisively. "I don't think you're leadership material, Clark. I really don't." His shoulders sagged completely. He knew it was truly over. No reference. No redemption. No second chance. I turned and walked away from him. But the real ending of this story wasn't Clark's downfall. The real ending was what came after it. Now I sit in my new corner office with windows overlooking the entire district. I survived deliberate sabotage designed to destroy me. I saved a dying branch everyone had given up on. I exposed corruption that stretched deeper than anyone realized. I climbed higher than Clark ever dreamed possible. But the real victory? I didn't become ruthless like him. I didn't lose myself. I didn't break into pieces. I built something instead. Something real and lasting. Something mine. And whenever I drive past Branch 14, now thriving and full of life and purpose, I remember the exact moment they tried to bury me. They didn't know I was a seed. And seeds don't die in darkness.
They grow.
6 months into my new role, I implemented changes across every branch in the district. New accountability measures, transparent performance tracking, anonymous reporting systems for staff. Everything designed to prevent another Clark from ever gaining that kind of unchecked power. Some managers resented the changes, called them micromanagement, called me paranoid. But the staff, the actual people doing the work every day, they understood. They'd been Clark's victims too. They'd just been too afraid or too defeated to fight back. I promoted Tessa to assistant manager at Branch 14. She'd earned it through loyalty and courage. Luis became head teller. Bailey trained new employees. The team that had survived Clark's sabotage became the example for the entire district. Corporate noticed. The CEO herself sent me a personal email. Your turnaround of Branch 14 and subsequent district reforms have been remarkable. We'd like to discuss opportunities at the regional level. Regional level. That meant overseeing multiple districts. Hundreds of employees. Millions in assets. It was more responsibility and power than I'd ever imagined having. I scheduled the meeting for next month. I wanted time to make sure my current district was stable first. To make sure the changes I'd implemented were actually working long-term. One afternoon, I received a letter at my office. Handwritten envelope. No return address. Inside was a single page. Thank you for having the courage I didn't have. A friend. I never discovered who sent those encrypted files, who gave me the ammunition I needed to fight back. But I suspected it was someone high up in corporate. Someone who'd watched Clark operate for years and finally found someone willing to actually use evidence against him. I kept that anonymous note in my desk drawer. A reminder that even in corrupt systems, there are people who want to do the right thing. They just need someone brave enough or desperate enough to take the first step. Branch 14 won District Branch of the Year. They received the award at the annual company conference. I watched from the audience as Tessa accepted the trophy on behalf of her team, tears streaming down her face. She looked directly at me during her speech. This branch was supposed to close. We were all supposed to be fired. But one person refused to accept that fate. She fought for us when no one else would. This award belongs to Maya. The entire conference room stood and applauded. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. Not pride exactly. Something deeper. Gratitude that I'd found the strength to fight when everything in me wanted to just quit and walk away. Clark sent me one final email months later. Subject line: I'm sorry. The message was short. You were right about everything. I was wrong. I destroyed good people for my own ego. I'm getting help now. Therapy. Trying to understand why I became that person. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know. I stared at that email for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it without responding. Part of me wanted to write back something cruel. But mostly I just felt tired. Tired of anger. Tired of carrying that weight. I wrote back, I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I've moved on. That was it. No long explanation. No acceptance of his apology. Just acknowledgement and closure. I deleted the email thread and never looked back. The regional position came through. More responsibility. Better salary. An office with a view of the city skyline. But the best part? I got to implement the same reforms district-wide. Protecting employees. Creating accountability. Making sure no one else would be sacrificed the way I almost was. I hired carefully. Promoted people who'd been overlooked. Created mentorship programs. Built a culture where speaking up was encouraged, not punished. It wasn't perfect. Systems never are. But it was better. Measurably, documentably better. Years later, I was invited to speak at a banking leadership conference. The topic: surviving professional sabotage. I almost declined. Didn't want to be defined by what Clark had done to me. But then I thought about all the people sitting in audiences who might be living through something similar right now. Who might need to hear that survival is possible. I told the whole story. Branch 14. The closure plan. The falsified records. The encrypted files. The choice to fight instead of quit. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone was standing, applauding. Afterward, dozens of people approached me, sharing their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking up. One young woman was crying. "I'm living this right now," she said. "My boss is doing exactly what Clark did to you. I thought I was crazy. Thought it was all in my head." "You're not crazy," I told her firmly. "Document everything. Build your case. And when you're ready, fight back." She hugged me. I never learned if she won her battle, but I hope she did. I kept a photo on my office desk. Branch 14 on the day I arrived. Empty, dying, abandoned. Next to it, a recent photo of the same branch, thriving, busy, alive. The contrast was stark. A visual reminder of what's possible when you refuse to give up. My assistant knocked on my office door one morning. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." I looked up from paperwork. "Who is it?" She wouldn't give her name. Just said you'd want to meet with her. Curious, I agreed. A woman in her 60s entered my office. Sharp eyes. Expensive, but understated suit. She extended her hand.
Maya.
"I'm Carol Harrison. I've been with this company 32 years. Currently Senior Vice President of Operations." I shook her hand, confused. "What can I do for you?" She smiled slightly. "You already did it. I was the one who sent you those encrypted files." My breath caught. "That was you." "I'd been watching Clark for years," Carol said, sitting down, documenting his behavior. "But I never had someone brave enough to actually use the evidence. When I saw him target you, I knew this was my chance. You were young, desperate, had nothing to lose. Perfect combination. I didn't know whether to be grateful or angry. You used me." "I gave you weapons," she corrected. "What you did with them was entirely your choice. You could have quit, could have accepted defeat. Instead, you fought. That was all you." Carol leaned forward. "I'm retiring next year. The board is looking for my replacement. Someone with operational experience. Someone who's proven they can handle crisis. Someone who understands what really matters. People, not just profits." She paused meaningfully. "Someone like you, Maya. Senior Vice President. Executive level.
C-suite.
The kind of position I hadn't dared dream about even in my most ambitious moments." "I don't have an MBA," I said. "I don't have executive training." "You have something better," Carol said. "You have integrity. And the scars to prove it. That's rarer than any degree." She stood to leave. "Think about it. No pressure. But the board will be voting in 6 months. I'd like to recommend you." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the journey, about Branch 14 and Clark and that moment when I decided to fight instead of quit, about how one decision, one choice to stand up, had changed everything. I thought about the person I'd been before all this.
Scared.
Eager to please. Willing to accept mistreatment because I didn't believe I deserved better. That person felt like a stranger now. The board meeting was 6 months later. Formal. Intimidating. 12 executives sitting in judgment. They asked tough questions. About my experience. My vision. My leadership philosophy. But mostly they wanted to know about Branch 14. "Walk us through your decision-making process," the chairman said. "When you realized Clark was sabotaging you, why didn't you just quit?" I took a breath. Because quitting would have meant he won. Would have meant accepting that people like him get to destroy people like me without consequences. I couldn't accept that. Another board member leaned forward. "But you could have reported him through proper channels. Why gather evidence secretly?" Because proper channels had failed, I said honestly. Clark had been doing this for years. Multiple people had complained. Nothing changed. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to make the corruption impossible to ignore. The chairman nodded slowly. "And if you're given executive authority, what would you change?" "Everything that allows people like Clark to thrive," I said. "The systems that protect powerful people at the expense of vulnerable ones. The cultures where speaking up is punished. The shortcuts that prioritize short-term profits over long-term ethics. The room went quiet. I wondered if I'd gone too far. Been too honest. Too critical. Then the chairman smiled. That's exactly what we need. The vote is unanimous, Ms. Maya. Welcome to the executive team. I called Tessa first. Before anyone else. Before celebrating or processing, or anything. I got it, I said. Senior VP. They actually chose me. She screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I knew it. I knew you were going to make it. We talked for an hour. About everything. About Clark and Branch 14, and how far we'd all come. You changed my life, Tessa said quietly. When you showed up at that dying branch, I was just waiting to be fired. Planning my retirement at 53 because I thought I'd never work again. Now I'm a manager. Now I have hope again. You changed your own life, I told her. You chose to help me when you didn't have to. You chose to fight. My first major initiative as senior vice president was creating a whistleblower protection program. A safe, anonymous way for employees to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. It launched 6 months after I took office. The first week, we received 43 reports. 43 instances of harassment, discrimination, fraud, abuse that people had been too afraid to report before. We investigated every single one. Fired 7 managers. Disciplined dozens more. Created mandatory ethics training. The company culture began to shift. Slowly. Painfully. But it shifted. I still drive past Branch 14 sometimes. It's been 5 years since Clark sent me there to die professionally. The branch is thriving now. Expanded to 6 tellers. Won regional awards. Became a training location for new managers. There's a plaque in the lobby that I didn't ask for, but secretly love. It says, Branch 14. Rebuilt 2019. Where excellence refused to quit. People ask me sometimes if I hate Clark. If I'm glad his career ended. The truth? I don't think about him much anymore. He's not part of my story anymore. He was just an obstacle I overcame on the way to something better. The real story isn't about him at all. It's about choice. About deciding that someone else's cruelty doesn't define your worth. About fighting back not with anger, but with excellence. About refusing to be buried. Because they didn't know. Clark and people like him never know. That pressure doesn't destroy everyone. Sometimes it creates diamonds. Sometimes it creates something stronger than it was before. I was a seed they tried to bury. They didn't know that seeds grow best in darkness. That adversity doesn't kill everyone it touches. Sometimes if you're strong enough and lucky enough and stubborn enough, it just makes you bloom. And I bloomed.